Hi, it's September 12th, 2022. Deb Boulay here today, delivering to you information about an IEP and a 504. Now, the videos on special education that I posted so far explained to you what special education is, and also explain to you all the different types of settings that are used to house students in who have disabilities depending on their needs. And they are used in the Newburgh and Large City School District. Today, I'm going to move from there to what the actual documentation is that is a result of that testing that was done to classify your child as a student with a disability. So, testing has been done by a multitude of people. Information has been gathered in all different settings. So, just to make sure we're all on the same page, a special education teacher will do initial testing in a Wyatt or a Woodcock Johnson type of test, and have provided to you as the parent at that first meeting a report that explains to you what that testing showed or did not show. Additionally, there will be testing done by the school psychologist. We'll talk about intelligence levels, a whole bunch of things. And again, at that initial meeting, after the testing and the data has been gathered, you will be given, and if you're not, you're going to ask for it, a parental report that outlines the results of that piece of the testing. If your child is thought to possibly have a speech and language impairment, there will also be testing by the speech and language person. There will also be testing by the occupational therapist if needed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll end up with a formal set of tests with those results given to you and explained to you. And secondly, at that initial meeting will be a whole bunch of work samples from different classrooms, explanations of behavior, what happens in the gym class, physical education class versus what happens in the math class. So all of this information is presented together and a determination is made by that entire group of people, of which you as the parent are part of. You decide if your child has that disability or not, which kind of setting your child needs to be placed in. So, from that meeting comes either an IEP, which stands for an individualized education plan, or a 504. Now, they are both legal documents. They both require the district to do something. I just want to read you the definitions of both. I will also put up what I'm reading to you on the website as well on Facebook. So here we go. So an IEP, an individualized education plan, is a program developed to ensure that a child who has a disability identified under the law and is attending elementary or secondary education receives specialized instruction and related services. So if your child needs a setting other than a general ed filled with 30 some odd kids in the same classroom, if your child requires something different than that, they require specialized instruction. And related services would be speech and language, psychological services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then your child will end up with the thing called an IEP. What's a 504? The 504 plan is a plan. It's not a program. It's a plan developed to ensure that a child who has a disability identified under the law and is attending elementary or secondary education receives accommodations that will ensure their academic success. So, what's an accommodation? An accommodation is something that needs to be done in that general classroom to ensure that the child understands. Now, an IEP, I've seen some be 29, 30 pages long for one child. I've seen an IEP be as short as 7 pages. I have never seen a 504 plan more than 2 pages. 2 different presentations, 2 different levels of intervention. So now let's first talk about that 504. So a child could be in a regular classroom who requires, let's say, there's something behavioral, um, and so that child may need um, continued prompting. So that 504 plan may read something like, during the course of instruction, teacher will go over and tap student A on their shoulder as a signal to remind the student that their behavior is crossing a line, to bring them back into focus. And it'll say that that will be done in all core content classes, English, math, social studies, science, or it could say that will be done across every single class that the child has. It may say it's only to be done during lunch. It's very specialized for that one child, but it's an accommodation. It's something that needs to be done when a child needs to be prompted or redirected in some way, or if a child needs assistance. That's it. That's what a 504 is. Now, 504s don't come from the place where the IEPs come from, housed in the district system, computerized system. The last time that I checked, which was last year at this time, those 504s are presented differently, and teachers have to rely on administration to flag them correctly so that the teacher knows that they exist. So if your child has a 504, what I would suggest that you do is, now it's the beginning of school, I would shoot an email to every teacher that your child has, including the phys ed teacher, the music teacher, and let them know that your child does in fact have a 504 that they need to be aware of. And then the teacher will be able to search that out and find it and know what to do. Now, an IEP is a whole different presentation. IEPs, the student's profile in Infinite Campus, which is where everything is housed related to each student. There's a little actual flag that shows up that a teacher sees, and the teacher has to, even if the teacher has 150 kids, has to go through each one to find if there's a flag for that, click it open, and is required to read that IEP on their own and its contents. So again, if your son or daughter is changing classes, right, that means that the teacher of those classes could have 150 kids, let's say. And so that teacher is going to need to somehow find the time within their day, which is limited, to go through each IEP to understand what they, as the teacher, has to do to follow that legal document, whatever that IEP says. Now, what's in an IEP? I want to go through this with you. Now, there's several wonderful sites that are out there that explain in detail what each section is and what it means and what are the possibilities and what you can ask for as a parent. So I'm going to include just one on the post of this on the Facebook page of No, but know that they're out there for you. So the more you want to know, the more information you would need to click on, but it's out there. So, okay, first thing in an IEP, again, legal document, legal. The district must adhere to what's in this IEP that was developed from that initial meeting. The first thing, the whole top part, first page usually of the IEP, lists information about where the child lives, who you are, your telephone number, personal information like that. If the child has alerts, like if the child is allergic to something, if the child wears glasses, if the child suffers from migraines, that will be on the first page, along with a whole set of scores. And those scores are from that initial testing, and they give feedback to anybody looking at that IEP. So again, just some background for you. If a special education teacher has a higher level of education when it comes to being able to understand these disabilities, those tests are key. So a good spec ed teacher is going to go and immediately see where the shortfalls are for your child based on those numbers. They know how to interpret those numbers regardless of the test. So that whole first page is about the testing itself. And it also talks in that first part of the IEP about present levels of achievement. So where is student A? So student A has a disability, let's say, has ADHD, just as an example, some hyperactivity. Um, and that it'll also say there the student has failed whatever class or is not working up to capacity for whatever class. There's input from different places. So it gives a big picture about your child's actual performance and testing results. Another section is called annual goals. I'm going to get back to that at the end of this tape. Another one is called measuring and reporting schedules. So what that means is that those goals that I'm going to talk about in a little bit need to be measured. So your child will receive a report card if you're secondary every quarter, if you're elementary 3 times a year, you get a report card. And then additionally, in addition to that report card, comes an IEP progress report. So those goals have to be rated. Did the student achieve them? Did they not achieve them? Are they progressing slowly? Are they not progressing at all? There's different categories and ways in which the special education teacher ranks them. That goes home to you and the secondary level once every quarter. Whenever that report card goes home, in a separate envelope goes an IEP progress report. So special education teachers, again, will teach in the classroom. They will issue a report card. Like for me, my last year, I was a math teacher. So 4 quarters, secondary math teacher, I had to do actual report cards for all of my students for every class. And additionally, because I was a special ed teacher, I had to produce IEP progress reports for each of my kids for each of those 4 quarters, 2 different documents that came out of that, 2 different reports. So that section of the IEP says how often that's going to be done. Is it going to be done 4 times a year? Is it going to be done 3 times a year? Is it going to be done 5 times a year? If the IEP says your child should really attend summer school, there'll be a report for that. Next, special education services. What does that mean? What types of services does your child need to participate in? It could also be related services. So things like we'll have speech 3 times a week in group setting. We'll have individualized counseling 1 time every 2 weeks in group twice a week. A student will receive special transportation to and from school. Whatever is required specific to your child as far as the service is what's going to be there. Supplementary aids and services. Let's say your child has dysgraphia or dyslexia or some type of a writing disability. In this section will be if your child has access to certain software on their Chromebook that will allow them to speak into it, to have things typed, among many other possibilities. Extent of non-participation, what does that mean? That means that what part of the day does your child not have specialized instruction? So for 99% of the students that I have taught over all these years, the student receives these special education services and specialized instruction in whatever way the IEP says. Um, that happens during English, math, social studies, science. It does not happen that I have seen in physical education, in home and careers, in foreign language, anything like that, tech. So those teachers are on their own to have to try to handle special education students who do not have a special education teacher in that room with them at that time. Testing accommodations is another piece I'm going to talk about in a sec. So I want to first go back and let's talk about annual goals, and then let's talk about testing accommodations with this IEP. All right, so annual goals. If your child has a deficit in reading, they have to have a yearly goal on how they are going to progress. What is that goal? If your child is not able to multiply numbers on their own, there has to be a goal that addresses that. So it all goes back to really that beginning part of the IEP. What's been identified now in the goals section has to be listed as a goal so that progress is in fact done. And so those goals could be, I've seen some IEPs have, my goodness, like 17, 18 goals. Some for English, some for math, some for speech, some for psychological pieces, some for occupational reasons. And then seen some who have only had like four. So it depends on how that IEP is written and then also how it's maintained each year, because this whole process happens each year. And then testing accommodations, very important. Testing accommodations tell um, the teacher how, when a test is given, it needs to be administered for your child. It goes along with some another section called program mods. It's let in there, but let's say, for example, your child is a very slow writer or cannot take notes in the same time as the teacher would give them. There may be a guide in there for your child to have a copy of major notes given to them. That may be something the teacher has to do. But when it comes time for a test, let's say your child may need to have extra time to take that test to process it, that would be a testing accommodation. There's all different kinds of testing accommodations, um, more than I have time to explain. But again, the resources are out there. When you go to your CSE meeting, your yearly CSE meeting, that's the time when you, as the parent, really need to have your ducks in a row to be able to speak on behalf of your child if they're too young, or to speak with your child who will be at that meeting if they're older, to really talk about the types of accommodations that would best meet the needs for your child. So in a nutshell, that's the difference between an IEP and a 504. Again, if your child has been classified as a special education student, one of those two things will happen. That's it for here. The next one I'm going to do is going to talk about really how um, the special education teacher, we call them case managers. I'll explain what that is and how that needs to be your best friend, parents, if your kid is classified, okay?